Imagine this. You're standing at the edge of everything you ever wanted. The relationship that could finally feel safe. The opportunity that could transform your life. The version of you that's been begging to surface for years. And just before you step into it, you flinch. You hesitate. You ruin it. Not with a scream, not with a storm, but with something subtle. A missed call, a sarcastic comment, a decision that feels logical but leaves you hollow. And then you tell yourself the story you always do. Maybe it wasn't meant to be. Or worse, maybe something's wrong with me. But what if neither of those stories is true? What if underneath your rationalizations and self-help mantras, there's a part of you that wants to lose, that needs to lose, because losing is the only place where you still feel safe? Carl Jung called it the shadow, the unconscious force that contains everything you've rejected, denied, or disowned. But it's not just your anger, your envy, your shame. It's your hunger for truth, your suppressed capacity for power, your forgotten fire. And when that fire goes unloved, it turns on you. It doesn't disappear. It waits. It hides behind your most reasonable decisions. It lurks in the apologies you shouldn't have made. It disguises itself as logic when it's really fear in costume. Have you ever noticed how hard it is to accept praise, but how easy it is to accept blame? How quickly you downplay success, but how intimately you cradle your pain. That's not humility. That's sabotage. And sabotage is never random. It's a ritual, an unconscious oath you made long ago to protect yourself from the very life you say you want. Why do you crave connection but fear being truly seen? Why do you chase growth but cling to the patterns that make you small? Why do you want to be free, yet never walk out the open door? These aren't contradictions. These are messages. Messages from the parts of you you buried. The child who learned that attention is dangerous. The teen who survived by shrinking. The adult who learned that pretending is safer than being. So let me ask you, what if your worst decisions were your most loyal ones? What if the part of you ruining everything is also the part trying to save you? There's a reason you keep cutting the wires to your own power. And until you see it, you'll call it fate. Just like Jung warned. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life. And you will call it fate. You don't sabotage yourself because you're weak. You do it because something in the dark still believes you'll die if you grow. So what happens when you finally shine a light on that belief? Keep walking. The truth is waiting in the shadows. Self-sabotage isn't loud. It doesn't scream. It whispers. It sounds like, "Let me think about it. I'm just tired right now. I'll try again next week." It looks like procrastinating the one thing that would move your life forward. Ghosting the person who saw something real in you. Saying yes when your whole body means no. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Most of the time, you don't even realize you're doing it. Because your sabotage comes wrapped in a costume called self-protection. You sabotage because you were once punished for being authentic. You hide because being seen once cost you something. You delay because taking up space used to be dangerous. Carl Jung knew this. He understood that our personalities are just masks. Defense mechanisms we developed to survive early wounds. And at the center of those wounds is the shadow, the part of you were told to lock away. But here's the paradox. The more you repress the shadow, the more control it has over you. It becomes your inner saboteur. Not because it's evil, but because it's been neglected, ignored, exiled. And like anything exiled, it wants to come home. But it can't knock on your door. It has to sneak in through your fears, your impulses, your patterns. Have you ever exploded in anger and had no idea why? Felt crushing anxiety just when things were finally going well? Sabotaged a great relationship with coldness or detachment, then wondered why you feel so alone? That wasn't just emotion. That was your unconscious fighting for airtime. Your shadow making its presence known. Because as long as it's hidden, you'll keep mistaking coping for living. You'll call numbness peace. You'll call busyness purpose. You'll call toxic relationships lessons. And all the while, your real self, the one you locked away, is suffocating. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." So you scroll, you distract, you chase perfection. You become everyone's savior but your own. But none of it fills the void. Because the void isn't out there. It's the silence left behind when you abandoned yourself. Until you meet your shadow, you'll keep abandoning yourself over and over and calling it discipline, humility, strength. But it's not strength to run from your reflection. It's fear. Fear that what you find inside won't be lovable. But here's the secret. The moment you stop running is the moment you start healing. Not because your shadow disappears, but because it no longer needs to fight for your attention. When you listen to what you've buried, you stop being controlled by it. You don't sabotage your life anymore. You shape it. So ask yourself, are you avoiding failure or avoiding your own potential? Because maybe, just maybe, what you fear isn't falling. It's flying, and the shadow knows it. Most people say they want to heal, but what they really want is to feel better, not to see deeper. And that's the trap. Because real healing isn't soft. It isn't pretty. It doesn't always feel like love. Sometimes it feels like being torn apart. Because before you can become whole, you have to meet the parts of yourself you abandoned just to survive. Think about it. How much of your personality was shaped not by choice, but by pain? How much of your calm is actually emotional numbness? How much of your strength is just fear wearing a suit? You say, "I'm just not a very emotional person." But what if you were, once, before you were punished for it? You say, "I don't care what people think." But deep down, you do. You always have. You just buried that part of you under layers of detachment. Carl Jung understood this long before it became Instagram wisdom. He knew that healing isn't about becoming something new. It's about remembering. Remembering who you were before the world told you to be someone else. But that kind of remembering hurts. Because to heal, you have to revisit the moment you fractured.
You have to sit with the parts of yourself you once labeled bad, wrong, too much, and not try to fix them, not try to silence them, but listen. To the child who stopped speaking up because no one listened. To the teen who laughed at themselves before anyone else could. To the adult who's been performing a version of success that looks perfect on the outside, but feels like a prison on the inside. That's why healing feels like falling apart. Because you're not losing yourself. You're losing the lie. The lie that you have to be easy to love. The lie that you must always be in control. The lie that darkness makes you unworthy. Jung said, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." That's why affirmations don't work if you're still lying to yourself. That's why positive thinking fails when your shadow is screaming underneath it all. That's why success feels empty when the voice in your head still sounds like your oldest wound. You can't cover up internal war with motivational wallpaper. It always bleeds through. And yet, the moment you stop running, the moment you sit still and say, "Yes, this pain too is mine," that's when something shifts. Because now your shadow no longer needs to shout. It no longer has to sabotage. It no longer needs to drag you backwards just to be heard. Now it can guide you. Not as a curse, but as a compass. So if it hurts right now, if it feels like you're falling apart, maybe that's because the mask is breaking, and the person underneath is finally ready to be seen. And that is the beginning.
What if the part of you you've spent your entire life avoiding is the very part that could set you free? The shadow isn't here to destroy you. It's here to complete you. But first, it tests you. Not to punish you, but to see if you're finally ready to face yourself without flinching. And the test shows up everywhere. In the partner who triggers all your deepest wounds. In the job that drains your soul, yet mirrors your need for approval. In the silence that terrifies you, because it echoes all you've buried. You keep thinking life is attacking you, when in reality, it's just reflecting you. Over and over, until you wake up. Carl Jung understood this better than anyone. The shadow is not evil. It's wounded. And wounds, when ignored, don't disappear. They evolve into survival strategies, into perfectionism, into passive aggression, into addiction, anxiety, control. But if you listen, really listen, your shadow becomes your greatest teacher. It tells you why you're afraid of love, why you push away peace, why success leaves you feeling lonelier, not freer. Because the shadow carries all the truths you were too afraid to feel at the time. And now those truths demand your attention. But here's the shift most never make. You don't integrate the shadow by fixing it. You integrate it by honoring it. By sitting down with your rage and asking, what are you trying to protect? By facing your jealousy and saying, what truth are you revealing about my hunger? By letting your grief speak. Not as a problem to solve, but as a voice that finally deserves to be heard. Integration means you no longer split yourself into two. It means you stop performing for approval. It means you stop trying to be light and instead become whole. And when you do, something incredible happens. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself. You stop apologizing for existing. You start shrinking, contorting, censoring. You start moving differently. Not because you figured it all out, but because you've accepted that you never had to be perfect to be powerful. The people who walk with their shadow radiate a different kind of presence. Not loud, not flashy, but real, rooted, unshakable. They don't dominate the room, they anchor it. Because their energy is no longer being spent hiding from themselves. You can feel when someone has made peace with their darkness. They don't need to impress you. They don't need to win. They don't need to run. Because they've already done the one thing most people will never will. They've stopped lying to themselves. So what if your shadow wasn't the thing holding you back, but the part of you most desperate to set you free? You feared the fire. But what if that fire is where your strength has been waiting all along? Walk into it. Not to burn, but to become.
Let's get one thing clear. You're not broken. You're divided. And what you call self-sabotage isn't destruction. It's an unconscious reunion. It's the rejected parts of you trying to come back home the only way they know how, by disrupting your illusions. You see, healing doesn't begin when things get better. It begins when the lies start to crack. The lie that you have to stay positive, no matter what. The lie that your trauma made you stronger. The lie that control equals maturity. Jung warned us, people will do anything to avoid facing their own souls. And we do. We build identities out of denial. We worship discipline and call it progress. We numb with achievement and call it purpose. But the truth? You don't need to become more. You need to remember what you've hidden. Because the path to wholeness doesn't start with light. It starts in the dark. It starts the moment you sit alone and you stop distracting. You stop fixing. You stop performing. And you just feel. The shame, the grief, the quiet ache that's been with you since childhood. The one that whispers, if they really knew me, they'd leave. You think your healing lies in becoming more palatable. But the truth is, your freedom lies in becoming more honest. That's where the work begins. Not when you conquer the shadow, but when you finally stop treating it like an enemy. Your anger, not a flaw, just a boundary that wasn't honored. Your envy, not toxic, just a compass pointing to unmet desire. Your fear, not weakness, just a part of you that hasn't been protected. You're not here to destroy your darkness. You're here to integrate it. And integration doesn't mean approval. It means acknowledgement. It means saying, yes, this is part of me. This jealousy, this rage, this sadness. And it doesn't make me less. It makes me real. That's how the unconscious becomes conscious. That's how the shadow loses power. Not by being eradicated, but by being seen. Because when you stop fighting yourself, your energy shifts. You no longer react, you respond. You no longer chase validation, you stand in truth. You no longer live from fear, you move from awareness. The greatest lie ever sold is that healing should feel good, that it's all peace and love and high vibrations. But the reality? Healing is violent clarity. It's shedding false identities like skin. It's looking in the mirror and seeing everything you once ran from and not turning away this time. Carl Jung knew that what you don't confront becomes your script, and you'll call it destiny until the day you finally say no more. So ask yourself, are you ready to stop being at war with your own soul? Because the shadow doesn't want your destruction. It wants your attention. And once you give it that, real attention, without judgment, it becomes something else entirely. Not a saboteur, not a threat, but a guide, a mirror, a map. And that is when you finally begin.